Hello, how are you, friends of Relatos de la Noche? As many of you surely already know, every day we receive hundreds of stories through email, comments, and the Facebook page. We can't always read them all, but we try to do so, even going through emails from a long time ago that we barely have a chance to read. Among these emails, we just came across one that mentioned the suicide of a person. Now, getting into the story, it's due to causes that are, let's say, difficult to explain. We read the message, and even though it wasn't very long, it was very intriguing. We got in touch with the author, and in fact, this experience has only grown in intensity. The city of origin will be revealed to us. The names of those involved will be changed, and we will try to act with all the respect that the death of a person deserves. Also, of course, we will try to fully respect the content of the email that included this experience. If any close relative of those involved happens to come across this video and wants any part of the story to be omitted, we apologize in advance, and please don't hesitate to contact us. We strongly advise that children and anyone under 14 not listen to this content, especially on this occasion. You'll understand as the story goes on. We hope you enjoy it. This is Relatos de la Noche. Mariana, my cousin, was the oldest daughter of my Uncle Carlos and my Aunt Marta. We were never very close because we were very different, but I always liked her a lot. I enjoyed seeing her and having a light conversation with her at family parties. And from my perspective, Mariana had everything to be happy. She went to a private school where she had the best grades. Her friends were as pretty and popular as she was. At 14, puberty seemed to have no effect on her at all because she was so pretty and charming that she was always the center of attention wherever she went. Her parents had the most comfortable finances in our whole family. She didn't seem to lack anything. That's why it felt like the world was crashing down on us the night we got a call from my grandfather saying that Mariana had committed suicide. I remember my father picked us up a few minutes later and we rushed like hell to my Uncle Carlos's house. The family and everyone else were there. They were inconsolable in disbelief while the police kept searching and the neighbors from the gated community gathered around. My Aunt Marta, devastated, told us what had happened. While she and my uncle were visiting some friends, Mariana was at home getting ready to go to a party with her friends. Lucia, the youngest daughter, was about to arrive from her swimming practice shortly after 8 in the evening. The mother of one of her friends dropped her off at the door of the house, as always. But when Lucia entered, she came across the most horrible scene one could imagine, with something that no one, much less an 8-year-old girl, should ever have to conceive in their mind. Her sister was hanging by the neck from the balcony in their parents' room. Hanging right in front of the entrance, still wearing her school uniform. All deaths are sad, yes, but this one devastated the family. It took a long time for even us to get back to our normal lives, without having Mariana constantly on our minds. I dreamed about the scene for a long time, as real as if I had lived it myself. My aunt and uncle's marriage lasted just one more year. After that, my Uncle Carlos moved to the United States, where he's from, and my Aunt Marta moved to Querétaro with Lucia. The house, practically abandoned after what happened, belonged to her, and it became more of a burden, a bad memory, than an asset for her family. At that time, coincidentally, my dad wanted to invest in buying a small apartment. But my Aunt Marta, since she was his sister, offered him the house for a much lower price than it was actually worth. Convinced that it would be taking advantage of his sister's pain, My dad flatly refused, until my grandfather convinced him that in the end it would be the best for everyone. He finally bought the house. He remodeled it and tried to rent it out for several months without any luck. When I was about to start high school, my parents wanted me to go to one with a better academic level, a private school, for the first time in my life. They told me it would be. At the same school that Mariana had attended since elementary school. And it also hit me like a bucket of cold water when they told me that's due to the school's closeness to my parents' jobs. The most convenient thing for everyone would be to move to the newly bought house and rent out. The house on the outskirts, where we always lived. Of course, I absolutely refused to take Mariana's room, a beautiful room, the dream of any young girl, and I settled in the adjoining room, which used to be Lucia's, and apparently had been used as a storage room to keep everything my uncles couldn't or didn't want to take from the house. The first day there, I was so tired that I slept in the room, still full of objects and memories from better times in Mariana's family. I tried to relax, to forget about the nightmares, to forget about what had happened just a few meters away from me years ago. Thinking about that, I had only fallen asleep for a few seconds when a sound suddenly alerted me. Someone was walking in the next room, in Mariana's room. I kept hearing the sound. At first it was very faint, until it was strong enough for me to be sure that someone was walking in that room. I stayed still, not in shock, without the courage to run to my parents' room, because I had to cross the hallway and walk past that door. I couldn't describe the fear I felt at that moment, especially when I heard the sound of a door opening, and then some heavy footsteps slowly walking down the hallway until they reached my door. I wanted to think that I was dreaming. I opened my eyes. Under the door, I saw the shadow of someone standing in front of it in the hallway. And then the doorknob turned, opened. It lasted only a moment, but it felt like an eternity to me. When the door opened and I was able to recognize my father, I felt a mix of relief and fear that to this day is hard to explain. Calmness returned to me for a few seconds. To me, who for a moment had ghosts in my head, but just as it came, it went away. When my dad turned on the light, I saw that he was completely pale, and he asked me with the most serious voice I can remember, "You weren't the one who was walking a moment ago, right?" "No," I replied. And so, with everything in my 15 years, I felt how my dad picked me up at that moment and took me to the room where my mom was waiting with the light on. "I heard it too," I told them. Meanwhile, my mom, who has always been the most scientific one in the family, tried to explain what we had all heard, saying that sometimes energies remain in places where such strong events happened, where there were such intense emotions. She would say it, and then fall silent, surprised, maybe by the theories she always thought were crazy, and that now she herself was using to try to explain that what we had just heard were not the footsteps of a ghost. Later, I found out that the next day my dad talked to my Aunt Marta, who confirmed to him that the others also heard the footsteps in Mariana's room, that even the moving guys claimed they heard a young woman's voice singing upstairs, that she believed Mariana continued to be in that house in one way or another. She told him that it was too painful for her to live in that home, where she lost everything. But did she really sell the house at that price? And specifically to him, it was so that whatever remained of Mariana in that place would stay with someone who had loved her very much. "I can't blame you if you don't want to do it," he said. "I can't, since I myself couldn't stand being there. But if you can, brother, don't leave my little blondie alone there." When my dad told us about it, everything seemed to make sense within my aunt's grief. It seemed to be our duty, especially because her family always helped us a lot. And we all agreed, without really knowing what we were in for. The calm days were few. Suddenly, we would hear footsteps walking through the empty room in the afternoons. But we started to take it as something normal, to live with it, although it always chilled my blood when I heard it at night. Already completely clear in the silence of those hours. With us, everything was bearable, but the situation in the house was not the same for our guests. Mrs. Andrea, for example, the lady who helped us 2 or 3 times a week with the cleaning, one day she stopped coming. She stopped answering my mom's calls. Concerned something happened to her, my mom went to look for her at her house, even though she only knew the street where she lived. Asking almost door to door, she reached her, and the lady, very embarrassed, explained to her why she wouldn't go. She wouldn't go anymore because of what lived in the house. She told her that when she was left alone and started cleaning the floors, there were footsteps that could always be heard behind her, that never left her alone. She said that on one occasion, without knowing, she opened Mariana's room door, which remains exactly as she left it. And she said she had a feeling of infinite sadness, of desolation, and had to close it immediately. The day she left never to return, she swore she clearly felt 2 hands that tried to push her down the stairs. She fell but managed to stop herself, and nothing worse happened despite her age. At that moment, alone, talking in the house, she told them to leave her alone, that she was going to leave and wasn't coming back, and she kept her word. She asked my mom to forgive her and said she would understand if she didn't believe her, and my mother then tried to calm her down, telling her what had happened to us, telling her Mariana's story about what had happened in that house. I was trying to make her see that I did believe her. "No, ma'am, you're mistaken," he told her. "It's not a little girl that's in that house." Right at that moment, I was coming out of my room to greet a friend who was coming to visit me, and we were about to find out that Mrs. Andrea was right. I was excited when the doorbell rang. Paula had finally accepted my invitation to see the new house. We were both sad because, for the first time since elementary school, we were going to be in different schools. And I think that, in a way, she was a little upset with me about it, even though I explained to her that I couldn't do anything about that decision. When I came out, she waved her hand happily from the entrance of the garden, and I ran down to her. My parents weren't home, so I wanted to take the opportunity to talk to her about everything that was happening to me. Something way too strange to explain over the phone or by text. I let her in and showed her the garden, with a design honestly absolutely beautiful thanks to the patience, creativity, and dedication of my Aunt Marta. Suddenly I turned my back to show her a fountain and heard a startled scream, which almost immediately turned into laughter. "What happened?" I asked her. "Your dad almost scared me to death," she replied. "My dad? Why? What's wrong with you?" "He was leaning out of the window up there with a horrible devil mask on," she told me. When I heard her, I was filled with fear. I didn't know what to do, and I hesitated to look toward the window. I didn't want to. I refused to think about what might be in that room. "Which window?" I asked. "That one, the one in the middle." I felt my body weaken. She was referring to the window in Mariana's room. "Shut up. That's not true," I said, starting to cry. He asked me what was wrong, why I was acting like that. I could only tell him that there was no one in the house. "I swear I saw him," he told me with a horrible look on his face. "I thought he was trying to scare us. You know how he is." We both looked toward the window. At least I had a heavy feeling like someone was watching us. From our perspective, we could only see a fragment of the room's ceiling. The curtains were slightly open, but we never touched them. We never opened them. Before we could say anything, a shadow passed across the ceiling as if someone was walking through the room. I can't explain it. And the shadow was barely a silhouette, but I felt that it was Mariana's shadow. When the silhouette passed by, Paula hugged me, frightened. The curtains suddenly fell as if someone had ripped them from below, and we ran out to the street, hysterical. A neighbor was on the sidewalk and came over, worried, to ask us what was happening. I couldn't speak, but Paula told him there was a stranger in the house. "Call the police while I go check," he said. And he started signaling to another neighbor who was arriving in his car a few houses away. "Someone broke into your house," he shouted, and the neighbor grabbed an L from his car, one of those they use to change tires. They went into the yard with Paula, and she pointed out the window where we saw him. I could swear that they stopped suddenly. Obviously, when they realized which room it was. And remember that right above them, Mariana's lifeless body had been hanging for hours until her sister found her. They went in anyway, with Paula following. I didn't call the police? Unfortunately, I knew or imagined what it was about. Minutes passed and they didn't come out. I went in to see what was happening, and gathering my courage, I went up the stairs and ran into Paula, who was calling the police at that moment. She told me there was someone. We saw that he ran and hid in the closet. I couldn't believe it. I didn't know whether to be happy or even more scared. But I ran to the room where the two gentlemen were trying to open the doors of Mariana's huge closet. "Get out, you bastard, before the cops get here and it gets worse for you," they said, shouting insults and pulling with all their strength, almost hanging from the doors, but they wouldn't budge. The sound of the electric gate at the car entrance caught our attention. One of the neighbors looked out the window and told me that my mom was arriving. I went out, and the other neighbor went out behind me. But a few meters away, we were stopped by the creaking of the closet doors as they opened very slowly. We went back to the room. The neighbor who had stayed was watching closely inside the closet, gripping his baseball bat. "No one's coming out," he said. The other neighbor cursed a lot and started violently moving the clothes around. desperately looking for someone they claimed to have seen. There was nothing, absolutely nothing, and the neighbor kept getting paler as he checked over and over again. And he realized that it wasn't possible for anyone to be there, for anyone to have come in. My mom ran upstairs, alerted by Paula and even more frightened. When she saw the looks on our three faces, she closed everything, drew the curtains, and asked us to go outside the room to talk. "Go downstairs, daughters. I'll be right there," she told us. We listened to her, and she stayed to talk with the two neighbors. After about half an hour, which felt like an eternity to me, I heard their voices coming down the hallway. One of them kept telling her something, like he would give her a phone number, insisting that he knew someone who could help us. The other one remained silent and with a distant look in his eyes. My mom thanked them and walked them to the street. When she came back, she stayed in the garden, staring intently at the window. When I noticed, I went out, and Paula did too. The curtain in Mariana's room was slightly open, just about 5 centimeters. "You saw that I had closed it completely, right?" my mom asked. "Yes, we saw," Paula answered her. I meanwhile was paralyzed. In the small crack, I could see a white face, not pale, but completely white, and with dark circles that were completely black watching us. I don't know if they could see it too, but if they did, they didn't say anything. I rubbed my eyes and looked the other way. I looked back, and the face was still there, completely clear, even though I was seeing it through a crack. And it didn't move. On the contrary, it seemed to stay there so that we could notice it. "Let's go inside," said my mom, surprising us. She said it in an angry tone, as if she was very upset. There was no fear in her voice. When we went inside, she started talking to us, but raising her voice as if she wanted someone else to hear her. "This house is ours that cost us a lot, and we are going to live here no matter what. And if anyone doesn't like it, they can get out, but no one is going to move us." In her annoying words, there was something comforting for me. My mom was acknowledging whatever was happening, and she was taking action, determined to defend what was hers. When my dad arrived a while later, they talked in private. We got together at dinner time and did so relatively calmly. When Paula's parents came to pick her up and I walked her to the door, I came back to see that the heavy silence that had been with us was broken, and my parents were arguing, apparently, about how they should handle the situation. Even so, my mom was trying to be rational. As rational as you can be when discussing an alleged ghost living in your house. My dad went to a drawer by the entrance, angry, and took out a pack of cigarettes that must have been there for years. It had been a long time since I saw him smoke. He went out and my mom followed him. I could hear them from the door. "We can just leave," my dad said to her. "Put up a for rent sign and to hell with it. If it gets rented, great. If not, we'll see." "Don't be ridiculous, please, Ernesto," my mom replied. "Why would we leave? What are we supposed to be afraid of? When have you ever heard of a ghost hurting anyone?" When she said that, she fell silent. My dad did too. I think at that moment they realized they were standing right under where they had found Mariana hanging. You can't ignore what was happening, or that face in the window, the heavy footsteps that could be heard at night, or the footsteps I always thought were Mariana's, and that could only be heard during the day. Those always without leaving her room. I was hoping I could finally start school, so I wouldn't have to spend so much time in that house, to distract myself, to meet new people, to focus on homework for the first time. My mom began befriending the neighbor across the street. Her son went to the same school I was going to attend, and both of them thought it was a good idea for him to tell me a bit about the school before I started. Also, that way, at least I would have a familiar face during my first days. It turned out to be the complete opposite, and it had nothing to do with Luis Alberto, the neighbor, but with everything that it triggered. The conversation we had, or with everything we would learn from each other. Mariana had been in my class since elementary school. Yeah, you knew that, right? That was the first thing she told me when we met, and no, I didn't know. Luis Alberto was a great person, but he had a rather strange sense of humor, so he hardly had any friends, except for a small group of kids just as weird as him who he hung out with at school. Mariana Bueno, let's say she was the complete opposite. She was a girl who cared about everyone, and everyone at school knew her. That's why, even though they would say hello and sometimes walk to school with one parent or another, there was never a real friendship with Luis. However, he seemed to know the whole story about the suicide perfectly. He had been in contact with Mariana during her last weeks. And I was about to find out more things than were good for my mental health. Have you ever felt anything strange in that house? He asked me. I'm asking you not to scare you, but I'm going to tell you something. My brother's window faces your house, and still, sometimes at night he comes to my room asking if he can sleep with me. And he says there's a girl hanging in the house across the street. My mom scolds him for saying that and blames me. He says for sure I told him what happened, but I never told him anything. And that seems very strange to me. Especially because of all the strange things Mariana went through at the end. When she finished telling me that, it hit me like a bucket of cold water. And it's just that my mom had been very careful not to say anything about the strange things happening in the house. Even the neighbors who helped us that time said that all the commotion was about a thief trying to get in through the back door. What Luis Alberto was telling me had nothing to do with what had happened to us. He was really talking about it because it had happened. Upon entering the school, I realized how hard it would be. Mariana was a very popular girl, and everyone had found out about what happened. And somehow also, everyone knew about me, that I was her cousin, and that now I lived in her house. I would swear they were even afraid of me. It seemed like nobody wanted to talk to me, and Luis Alberto, at that time, came to the rescue. In our free time, he invited me to hang out with his friends. All of them were obsessed with card games, comics, gore movies, and music that I didn't know about until then. We already knew something was going to happen with your cousin, Tony told me. A guy almost 6 feet tall, chubby with a baby face despite his budding beard, which was a lot for his 17 years. Apparently, he led the group. She came up to us to ask about some things she had discovered. he continued. What kind of things? I asked him. Things, videos. You were already getting to know her. Your cousin had very strange tastes among the things she searched for on the internet. And I'm not talking about the deep web or anything like that. I'm talking about websites anyone can access, about YouTube videos with no privacy at all, other than having dozens of random numbers and letters in the title. I don't know how she found them. I don't know how she started getting into that, but it really messed her up. Luis Alberto remained silent while the others talked about how people could be influenced when coming across strange videos on the internet. I noticed. And when we were walking home, just him and me, I asked him why. I don't think it was just suggestion, he said. Nobody commits suicide because of suggestion. Your cousin didn't lack anything. They say at school it's because she learned her friend would date her ex-boyfriend, and everyone knew except her. But I don't think it was something that would have affected her like that. Besides, he paused as if he had regretted something he was about to say, and suddenly he said goodbye halfway and started walking back toward the school. Everything seemed stranger and stranger to me, and when I got home, I heard someone dragging a piece of furniture or something like that upstairs. I called out to my mom to check if it was her, but got no answer. I picked up the phone and confirmed that my parents weren't home. When this sound got closer to the hallway next to the stairs, I decided to quickly go out to the yard and start doing my homework in the garden. By then, I could already stand hearing these strange things, but I was still terrified of suddenly seeing something in the house. My mom arrived with a girl, the new girl, to help us with the cleaning. When I greeted her, I saw Luis Alberto arriving at his house with a group member. They signaled me over and I went with them. Look, we're going to explain some things to you, but you can't tell anyone else. Not the guys in the group, not anyone at school, not your parents. Is that okay? I told them yes, a little nervous. Let's go to your house. I think it will be easier to explain it there. We went in, I told my mom I'd be with friends in my room, and then we went upstairs. Luis stopped at the entrance and pointed to the next door. That one over there is Mariana's room door, right? Yes, I replied. Come on, I think we have to be there. I'm sure she didn't do it because of her boyfriend or her friends, said the other guy. I think Mariana's friend issue happened because she was distancing herself from her group. She no longer cared about spending time with them. She was almost always connected to those weird chats she found while talking with us. Is it this window? He asked as he stood next to her and suddenly opened the curtains. I thought he was talking to me, but before I could answer, Luis Alberto said yes. He also approached the window and pointed to the house across the street. The trees barely let me see that window, especially from where I was looking. His brother's room window. I haven't told you everything, forgive me, please, but I promise that now I'm going to be 100% honest with you, Luis told me. Weeks before what happened, I started to worry a lot about Mariana. The things she said were getting stranger and stranger. She would send me strange messages in the middle of the night, and by morning, she would assure me it hadn't been her. Suddenly, she would even send messages to the group chat that we eventually added her to, and she could write, for example, good night, and then a bunch of random characters, and then continue as if nothing had happened. Once she sent us a photo out of nowhere, a photo of herself with a completely serious expression, staring at nothing. Behind her, you could see a huge black silhouette. It looked blurry, as if someone had run quickly to avoid being in the photo. When she sent it, I went to my brother's room to look over here, toward this room, to see if there was someone here with her. And I saw a figure next to the window. At first, it looked like Mariana on a chair because she seemed taller than the frame, like she was fixing something, but she wasn't moving. She was just standing still here, in front of this window, right where you're standing now. Suddenly, Mariana, with her unmistakable hair, came into the room, and I realized that what was next to the window wasn't a person. It wasn't anything normal, but rather the silhouette of something huge. I ran to my room to write to Mariana in the chat, grabbed my laptop, and ran back to my brother's room to see. I know you won't believe me, but that huge silhouette, it seemed to have crouched down, and a face of a smiling devil was looking at me through the window. It looked like a horrible mask. When I heard Luis's story, I left the room immediately. What I had just written was too similar to what Paula claimed to have seen in that window just a few days earlier. I asked them if we could keep talking later. They said goodbye and left for Luis's house. I stayed in the kitchen with Mom and Hortensia, the new girl. We heard footsteps running upstairs, and Hortensia turned pale. "That's what I told you about, but I'm telling you there's nothing to worry about," my mom said, trying to calm her down. My phone vibrated. It was a message from Luis Alberto, with a pixelated image due to the cropping, but there was no doubt about what it was. The message just said, "We're across the street in my brother's room. There's someone right now at Mariana's window." I asked Luis Alberto and his friend to come, and together with Hortensia and my mom, we went up to the room to check. When we went in, we were only met with a horrible smell that filled the room. We followed the source to the bathroom in that room that nobody used. The smell was coming from the sink. It was a disgusting, nauseating smell, like there was a dead animal. Luis said he would check, but Hortensia interrupted him and went to get what was needed to clean it. Luis stayed by her side while the rest of us waited outside the room. Soon after, Hortensia screamed and Luis began vomiting. We rushed in, alarmed, to see that she had pulled hair out of the sink. A large ball of tangled blonde hair with what looked like clotted blood. It smelled horrible, and the rest of us held back the urge to vomit too. I had the photograph of that devil in the window for a long time. I must still have it on my old computer, and I even saw it once on a paranormal forum. I have no idea who uploaded it. And there they claimed it had been taken in another city. Hortensia stayed with us for only a week. Afterwards, her sister started coming, and she stayed for a long time. She told us that Hortensia, after being with us, had become very sensitive to bad things, to paranormal things. She strongly felt the presence of a girl in the house and attributed it to Mariana. She claimed that she could see her reflected behind her when she was cleaning, near a mirror or a glass cabinet. She found clumps of blonde hair by the sinks all over the house. She put up with it for a few days until someone or something pulled her hair really hard. When that happened, my mom was in the kitchen, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't convince her to stay with us anymore. We couldn't blame her. Mrs. Andrea had already left because she felt the presence of something. Hortensia because she felt Mariana. It seemed strange to us that one of them hadn't mentioned the other presences. Each one felt something in particular. The strange thing was about Hortensia, whom we kept hearing about through her sister. And after that, she even started seeing strange things in her house. I always felt bad about it. My mom still wants to think that it's just her imagination. Around that time, Aaliyah, one of Mariana's friends, started talking to me. Apparently, she had fallen out with the other girls in the group and thought the best way to make them mad was to hang out with me, who I guess the others saw as undesirable. She confessed that to me later when we started getting along better and ended up becoming very good friends. Through her, I was able to understand a little more about Mariana's last weeks. She slowly started to drift away. She stopped spending every weekend with them like they used to do until then. The others knew something was wrong with her, but they decided to ignore it. When I told her what Luis Alberto and his friends had told me, she made fun of me a little. Did Tony really tell you he doesn't know how Mariana started seeing weird things on the internet? That damn fat guy was the cause of everything. I felt weird, deceived. I asked her to come with me to my house to confront Luis Alberto about it. When we arrived, I called him and told him to come over to my house, that it was something important. He arrived a few minutes later, and when she asked him, he denied everything, saying that Elia had surely lied to me and that Tony had nothing to do with it. Aaliyah came out of the bathroom where she was hiding, and Luis turned pale. It's okay. I haven't told you the whole truth, but I wouldn't want you to get more involved in this, she told me. Elia, he replied with a sarcastic smile. I guess it's a little late for that. I don't know if you've noticed where he lives and the things he has to put up with every night. Apparently, everyone knew about that strange side of Tony. Not just the guys in his little group, but the rest of the class too. Other kids at school. From what I found out later, even some teachers. However, no one really knew what the whole thing was about, nor had they seen the videos. It was a kind of club that very few could join, and somehow, we're not really sure how, Mariana joined it. With more trust, Aaliyah told me something very strange. Since the suicide, they had been receiving messages from Mariana's Facebook account. Very strange messages. Photos of Mariana with each of them, but in which Mariana's face appeared distorted, with almost demonic features. They talked about it among themselves, and that left them even more emotionally affected. When one of them started responding to the messages, demanding that they stop joking about it and respect Mariana. Whoever was on the other side of the message, they began writing things only Mariana knew. Secrets that only she knew. That's how it happened with the others until they decided to block her. I remember that I didn't like looking at her profile at all. When they told me about the messages, I went in, I saw her photos. I saw the ones where we appeared together. I was about to write in the chat to see if there was any kind of response. In the end, I just ended up reporting Mariana's account. Eventually, Facebook deactivated it as an active user. Luis Alberto was sure that Tony was the one who had sent those messages, but we were never able to confirm it. The day the Facebook account was canceled, I heard a commotion in Mariana's room. Footsteps and things moving around. The bathroom water faucets would turn on, and we had to go in to turn them off. Whenever we got closer, the footsteps would stop. And at night, it got worse. When I was trying to fall asleep, suddenly I heard different footsteps. The heavy footsteps in the hallway. I was surprised my parents didn't wake up this time. Whenever things got too intense, my dad would come get me and take me to their room. That particular night, they didn't hear anything. I tried to ignore the noises and footsteps. I put music on my headphones like always, but suddenly a bang startled me. Something loud in the next room. I felt the vibration on the floor, took off my headphones, and listened carefully. In that silence, with only the sound of dogs barking in the distance, I could clearly hear Mariana's voice crying briefly in the next room. Then, some footsteps running and disappearing toward the window, as if someone had jumped. I was shocked. I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't understand what I just heard. Something was heard near the trash cans in the yard. I looked out, and there, standing in the darkness, I could clearly see Tony looking at Mariana's window, without flinching at me or without realizing that I was watching him. I remember that for a moment I felt like everything was clear, that somehow Tony was responsible for everything. And he could have been in the room moments before and had jumped. Of course, he reached these conclusions in seconds. As she rushed out of the room into the garden to confront Tony, I could see him running away at full speed as he was leaving the yard, jumping over the small fence. Suddenly, something sent chills down my spine, and it wasn't Tony or his escape. Right next to me, just out of the corner of my eye, I could see the silhouettes of Mariana's feet hanging. I stopped. I felt ants on my legs, my back, my arms. I knew I had to run in, escape, but my legs wouldn't respond. I was just making an inhuman effort not to turn around. I was frozen. Like that, out of the corner of my eye, I saw the dangling feet getting closer to me. I gathered strength from my fear and ran inside. I could almost swear that in 3 seconds, I crossed the house, ran up the stairs, and started knocking on my parents' room. For some reason, this time, the lock on their room was on. Without turning to look, I could clearly feel that the hanging figure was moving down the hallway behind me, getting closer to me. My mom opened the door and I ran straight into my dad's arms. I asked them to close the door because there was something in the hallway. They saw nothing. When he looked out the window, my dad just said there were people in the house across the street, Luis Alberto's house. Very strange, since they went to bed early and it was after 3. I sent him a message and he just replied that we would talk in the morning. Is everything all right? I asked. He only replied with a resounding no. The light footsteps beside me could be heard again all that night. Later, I learned Tony called Luis Alberto and asked him to come out. When he had just run away from my house, he told him it was an emergency. When he came out, he gave him a list that looked like it had just been written in a hurried handwriting. They were links written by hand and apparently from memory. Links to YouTube videos. You'll understand, He repeated it to her and left immediately after handing them over. The angle in trees blocked his clear view of my house, but Luis claims that when he turned around, he could see in the distance, through branches and leaves, Mariana hanging in the same place where she had taken her own life. I didn't tell him what I had just seen at that moment, but I definitely believed him. I didn't want to watch the videos. I tried, but I couldn't. He decided to show them the next day to a close friend from his group. Tony didn't go back to school. The links were reviewed by school staff, but not by the police. Apparently, they weren't interested in reopening a case to see if Mariana's suicide had somehow been induced by someone else. I learned they went to Tony's house to find him, but he only lived with his older brother, who said he didn't know where Tony had gone. Luis Alberto's little brother took his own life a month later. I didn't want to know how he did it. I just knew that Luis found him. And I never spoke to him again. He never went back to his house, and his parents left just days after what happened. As far as I know, he deleted his Facebook account or blocked me, and he never contacted his friends again either. Things calmed down a bit at home, to the point that we no longer plan to leave. No one has experienced any physical aggression anymore. The heavy footsteps have almost stopped being heard. As you know, the first part of the story was more about what was happening to me back then. I never expected what happened with brother Luis Alberto. Someday I hope to see him and learn more about it. Knowing what happened to everyone is the only thing that would give me more peace of mind. Last Halloween, a guy I was dating picked me up, and without knowing anything about what had happened here, He mentioned seeing a hanged figure in the yard. Obviously, we don't even decorate for those dates. I felt more at ease until one day when I got home, I saw him. It was only 7 in the evening. It was starting to get dark. A red demon face with completely black eyes was watching me from the window of Luis Alberto's brother's room.